Good evening and welcome to the Rector's reflection again for this week. I wonder what you've been thinking about. One of the things that I try to do as regularly as possible, but don't always manage to do, is listen to one or other business program on the radio. Now, I need to confess immediately that I don't always understand everything that is being spoken about, but I do find that simply listening to it gives me some thought-provoking insights into trends, new possibilities, global movements, and all sorts of developments on various fronts. And I find that fascinating and tremendously worthwhile as well. On one of these programs recently, somebody was speaking about cybercrime and cybersecurity. In terms of the crime, they were reflecting more specifically on things like identity theft, password theft, information theft. I was particularly brought up short, I suppose is the word I'm looking for, as the person was talking about cybersecurity and this particular firm of specialists in this area. The platform from which they were operating was one at which they spoke about as having a 0% trust policy. Trust no one, trust nothing. Now, given the nature of their work, that does make sense. But I must say, on an interpersonal level, this does create all sorts of internal discomforts for me, especially since globally our job security and health security has been compromised. And does that mean then that we're increasingly tending towards regarding one another with growing suspicion? We're trying to ferret out any threats. That sounds quite paranoid to me. And I can't imagine that regarding one another with growing mistrust and suspicion is good for our psyches or even our souls. Now, I'm not for a moment proposing that we should blithely and indiscriminately trust everyone about everything. That would be foolhardy and surely a recipe for probable hurt, disappointment, breach of confidentiality at some or other point. Could we live, honestly, could we live without at least some form of trust in our lives? My sense is no. It's not the way our makeup is as humane beings. If we had no trust, for example, that gravity would operate tomorrow, the next day, and the next, and so on, and that the sun would appear even if we don't particularly see it. If we didn't have trust in even those most foundational things, our anxiety levels would skyrocket and perhaps even paralyze us, let alone cause us further health issues because of the intensity of that stress. There are tremendous benefits on all sorts of levels when we experience a lived reality of at least one healthy, trustworthy relationship. And for yourself, out of interest, just think of one treasure in your life and recognize the blessing that this trusting, trustworthy relationship brings to you. You know, it is a powerful tonic. It's a life belt. Forgive the mixed metaphors. If we could counterbalance the mistrust and suspicion in society by being in and of ourselves trustworthy, I wonder what would happen. I recently came across some work by Heather Craig about how to build trust and trustworthiness, which may be a quiet and healing revolution in its own way. By the way, Heather Craig is what's called a provisional psychologist at Monash University in Melbourne, Australia. Well, here are some of her pointers, just 12 of them, and some of them I've adapted. Most of them are probably familiar to us and make perfect sense, good, old-fashioned common sense, in fact, but perhaps there are a few that will need refreshing and refreshment in our own minds, and perhaps we need to process those a little bit more carefully for ourselves. So the first one is very obvious. Be true to your word and follow through with your actions, and that also means that we mustn't make promises that we can't keep. Learn how to communicate effectively and with clarity in order to create mutual understanding. Building trust takes time, takes us being willing to invest the time, and is part of being faithful to daily commitments. Attitudinally, it's about not acting too hastily, but rather taking time to consider things before making a decision, so that we make a decision that we know we will follow through and act upon effectively. Don't take for granted the relationships which we do have, and consistently value people. Develop active, attentive listening and be an open participant in teams, making relevant and respectful contributions, and also allowing the space to open up, which shows your willingness to trust others. Be honest. Gratuitously, kindly, and sincerely help others whenever you can. Don't suppress your feelings, nor let them spill out in an uncontrolled reactive manner. Use them for self-awareness and in caring compassion for others. Acknowledge and appreciate the genuine efforts of others. Be a person also of integrity, consistently and congruently. And then number 12, humbly admit your mistakes. And just those 12 form a wonderful foundation in building trust and trustworthiness, not only in our societies and communities, but also towards ourselves. We need to honor our entire selves, regardless of whether we approve of certain aspects of ourselves or not. And trust our self-awareness, our honesty, because that will go a long way towards helping us to develop our own trustworthiness in the eyes of others. I mean, it really does deeply excite me to think of our trustworthiness becoming a pillar upon which this new era can be built. I mean, it's an old, tried and tested part of the fabric of good, solid community. Proverbs speaks about it in chapter 3, verse 5. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. And that sounds like good, solid advice with which to begin to build this process of trustworthiness, and with which to round it off. Well, that's all I have for this evening, and when we meet, whether by voice, by sound, by listening, or by seeing each other, just know that in God we can trust that our spirits are already meeting. Take care during this stormy, unprecedented weather. Keep warm in the cold, and where and when we can, let's help each other in consultative, effective ways, always respecting the dignity of ourselves and of the other person. Good night.